My 40F husband, 44M, is extremely depressed and I think he might have cancer. But he won't go to the doctor because he thinks he has nothing to live for. How can I help him? My husband Jeff and I have been married for 12 years. Jeff has depression. He has struggled with this since he was a teenager, and I knew it was an issue when we started dating. However, he seemed to be managing it fairly well at the time, without treatment, and he always perked up when we were together, so I just thought he had gloomy days sometimes. Here is some background on why he is currently so miserable. Our relationship almost ended when we had been dating for 6 months after we discovered that we had different feelings on kids. I likely wanted children, when Jeff did not. In hindsight, it probably would have been better if we went separate ways at the time, but I loved him dearly. We stayed together because I thought Jeff was reconsidering his stance on kids, while he thought I was reconsidering mine. After we married, we moved to France for work and further training. We were happy those first few years in France. Life was good, but I had always viewed our time there as temporary. We went over with the intention to complete some further training and I always thought we would return to Canada. At some point, this changed for Jeff. He started a different job while in France that he absolutely loved and that had the potential to be a long-term position. He started to foresee our future in France as a permanent arrangement. I didn't realize this at the time. After a few years in France, my biological clock started ticking and I wanted to start a family. Jeff had reservations, but I thought it was just cold feet. We talked about this for a year before we started trying and we agreed that we would just have one kid. I was convinced that he would love fatherhood once he had the chance because he was good with his nephew. Things went sideways when we found out we were having twins. After they were born, Jeff's depression got worse. Many days he can't function because he is so annoyed by the children. The first few years with the twins in France were the most difficult time in my life. I was incredibly sleep deprived and sick all the time, pneumonia, strep throat, and countless other illnesses. I started to long to be closer to family who could help us out. My dream job opened up in our home city next to both sets of grandparents, and I jumped at the chance to apply. I thought it was a good opportunity for Jeff too because this city has a government facility that he always wanted to work at least he talked earlier in our relationship about working there. I thought it was exactly what we wanted, a chance to move back to Canada to be closer to family to help with the twins and a chance for both of us to get dream jobs. If we had stayed in France, I would not have had a permanent position. We also would not have been able to afford to buy a house, and we would have had to stay in our small apartment. From my perspective, there were a lot of advantages to moving to Canada, but Jeff didn't see it that way. When I got the job in our home city, we left France. We bought a house close to both sets of grandparents, which has helped so much with children. The housing market was very competitive and we bid on many houses before we were successful. I like our house, but it is not Jeff's dream house. It was difficult because it felt like we didn't have a lot of options, but Jeff continues to be unhappy about this too. Shortly after we moved here, he got an excellent job at the government facility that he used to talk about. Except he hates this job. It has become more of a managerial position and he is not using the skills that he was trained in. He also has trouble getting along with his boss. In short, these factors have made Jeff miserable: job he hates, house he hates, children he never wanted, all in a country he doesn't want to live in. If he could have his way, it would be to go back to France forever, childless, and continue to do the job that he enjoyed there. He feels I ruined his life and he reminds me of this regularly. I have offered to divorce him and set him free to return to France, but he always says that he wants to stay with me. He just wishes it was back to the happy years in our early marriage. I have offered to sell our house and build his dream house. I have also offered to help him find a job he loves in this city. But my suggestions are always rejected. I realize now that his depression is preventing him from improving the situation. He is wallowing in his misery and can't see a way to get out of it. I know he needs antidepressants and therapy, but he won't seek help. I feel horrible about the whole situation and I have become depressed myself. I am sure I am the AH for not listening better to what he wanted in life. But, this post is not about our marriage troubles, as there is a bigger problem. However, you need to recognize the depths of Jeff's depression, unhappiness, and anger to understand the next part. Jeff is currently sick. His symptoms have been getting worse for months. I strongly suspect that it is cancer that started in the lymph nodes in his neck and has possibly spread to his lungs. He is not willing to go to a doctor because he is extremely unhappy and depressed and he has nothing to live for. I have begged him to see a doctor, but each time he reminds me that this is the path he wants: suicide by critical illness. He repeats that I have gotten everything I want at the expense of his happiness and that the one thing he wants now is to die on his terms. I have done everything I can think of to change his mind, be a better wife if I can, try to get him into therapy to get his depression treated, because then maybe he would get his cancer treated, but nothing helps. I have not told anyone, family or friends, about the depths of our problems or Jeff's health. I could use some advice. Is there anything I can do to make this situation better?